All right, everyone. Welcome to our Level Up Live. Coming to you from Vietnam, as Jeffrey's already pointed out, the backdrop and the clothes I'm wearing look probably quite different to those of you that are in Melbourne. So today we're talking a little bit about gratitude, which is a very interesting topic for me because I think being in the wellness space and as my entry point to the wellness space was really through yoga, and you hear a lot about gratitude and some of the stuff that I would listen to and get some of the things people would explain to me 5, 6 years ago around the practice and the power of gratitude, I wouldn't necessarily agree with, and it would seem a little bit, I guess, a little bit woo woo for me, and something that I couldn't necessarily engage with. And so then when I have come into studying my postgrad in psychology and had the ability and learned how to read scientific papers and actually get taught some stuff about gratitude, it's been very interesting for me to realize and to understand the power and the effects it can actually have on our day-to-day life. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about it um, from a training perspective and a little bit from how we can use it to improve our sense of wellness and well-being. Hey, Vince. But also I will look at it from a neuroscience perspective and the chemical effect that's happening as we're going through it, and what's actually happening on a physiological, neurological, and chemical level when through the idea of gratitude. And so I guess that where I want to begin on top of that is that so often I think there is this narrative around doing things that are good for us. And I guess around any sort of habit forming, that we have to convince ourselves to do something. I think especially in the early days, right? Like when you're trying to get into the rhythm of whether it's going to yoga, gym, saunas, cold tubs, whatever it might be. And there's this real sense of almost this internal argument that can take place. If you're tired and if you can't be bothered going to the gym in the morning or something, and then you're like, oh, well, you should go, and this and that. And there's this internal monologue and narrative that takes place, which really comes from the effort to form habits and the effort that is required to begin to change neural pathways. So that the reason that things feel quite hard at the start and over time become a bit easier is really because through our neurological conditioning, we begin to form new pathways that make it easier for us to do things. And I think at the start, a lot of the time we can be moved to do something, and maybe I'm speaking more personally here, but it seems to be a bit of a trend in people I speak to from a wellness perspective, that we kind of we get moved to do something often from guilt, this sense of like, oh, maybe I want to gain weight or lose weight. Maybe I want to look a certain way. Maybe I think that I should be able to run a certain amount, or I should be meditating, or whatever it might be. There's this sort of social construct of what we should and what our lives should look like, and that we buy into, and therefore that can often create us to do something. And though that can have a positive effect, from my perspective, and actually what the science teaches us, is that doesn't have the same longevity as doing something from a sense of enjoyment and from a sense of freedom, opposed to being moved by a sense of guilt. And so when we do something because we feel like we should, we're not going to be as long rust. We're not going to have the same longevity. We're not going to have the same sort of resilience as when we actually do something for the love of it, opposed to the love of the alternative, or the fear of the alternative, I should say. And so, it can also move us, that sense of guilt, or, whether you want to say fear or, either of those two words. They can lead us to having a sense of achievement and success, because it does help us overcome barriers that we once had. But again, the reach of those effects and longevity of it is not necessarily going to be as impactful as when you do something for the love of it, or because you do something from a sense of freedom. And there's this real sense of, for me, it's a very masculine, and I don't mean male, I mean like kind of masculine approach of like, I'm going to beat something. And we hear a lot of that sort of terminology, whether it's around, like people often say, like, win the week, and I'm going to beat this, and I'm going to beat myself, I'm going to beat the part of myself that wants to have the pizza and doesn't want to go for the run, or whatever it might be. And for me, it's a very masculine approach, that we always have to win or overcome or beat something. And actually what the understanding and my understanding of gratitude is it's actually a lot more doing something for the love of it and doing something because you can and doing something for the enjoyment of it. And so to give you a bit of an understanding of what I guess gratitude is from my perspective and what the science kind of teaches us what gratitude is, it isn't just a thought about something, it's a very lived and felt experience of something. And so, and specifically the felt experience of being grateful. And so it's not just, I think that I'm grateful for this. And it's not just, I think that I feel good because of this or anything like that. Just checking. Still got a bit of connection. Oh, forgot you guys. Sorry. It seemed like it dropped out a little bit there. So to come back to what I was just saying before, the sense of an experience of gratitude is the very felt experience of gratefulness. And so quite often what we can think that we have is a sense of sorry guys, have I still got you there?
Yep. You did drop for a bit.
Oh, got you back. Sorry, guys. All right, that's better. So to come back to what I meant by what I'm defining as gratitude, it's the felt experience of gratefulness. And so it's not just thinking I am grateful for this, but there has to be a very felt experience of what you are grateful for. And that's a very hey Matt, that's a very different thing than just thinking I am grateful because the sun is out today, because there isn't necessarily the emotional connection to what we're trying to experience. And so when I'm going to get into the how to practice gratitude, I guess, and how that can be incorporated into your day-to-day lives, that's a really important thing. It has to be something that you genuinely feel and not just think. And that's a mistake I made maybe 4 or 5 years ago when I tried to incorporate a bit of a gratitude practice into my day-to-day life. I would just write down 3 things that I thought I was grateful for, just to write down the 3 things. And I didn't actually spend the time necessary in order to feel the sense of gratitude, which is actually where the neurochemical differences begin to take place. And so a little bit to you about for you, I guess, about the science of gratitude and what it is. And one of the key changes that actually incorporating gratitude into your day-to-day life will have from a neurochemical and a neurological perspective is it will actually begin to increase positive emotions and hormones. So through scientific research, through a daily gratitude practice or a consistent sense of feeling grateful for things, we begin to see an increase in oxytocin, serotonin, and dopamine. So the 3 main feel-good hormones that we experience in our body. And we actually see a decrease in we see a decrease in cortisol, and we see our body become more effective at managing and regulating stress. There's also been science to show that it improves our general day-to-day relationships and our sense of mental resilience. And on top of that, through brain scans, we can actually see that our prefrontal cortex increases in activity. And so this is the part of our brain that is in charge of, that really regulates the majority of our hormonal, of our neurological hormones and physiological hormones. And so we see that there's an increase in the prefrontal cortex, and over time, the brain actually begins to rewire itself. So things that were previously seen as harmful and negative actually begin to be adapted to help us manage our circumstances in different ways. And so in a way, in like a less scientific jargon way, basically, we actually become more optimistic opposed to pessimistic. That's a really easy way of surmising essentially what I just said, is that through practicing seeing things as positive and to practice being grateful for what we do have, we actually begin to rewire how our brain approaches and sees life. And because I've said this a few times in some of our level up lives, really the primary kind of core focus of our brain is to look out for danger. Of our mind, sorry, is to look out for danger. That is its core focus. It's trying to make sure that we are safe, and it's trying to recognize situations, places, ideas where we don't feel safe, and it's going to keep us on the lookout for those. And so if that happens quite a lot without any form of regulation, we begin to actually have a slightly more negative and maybe a little bit more of a neurotic bias, because that's the way that the brain has been programmed to think and been programmed to analyze things. And so through being more grateful for things, we actually begin to reorient its focus point. And so much of in our modern lives, where the majority of us who are looking at videos like this and considering ideas like this, we don't have the base needs that we don't have stress about our base needs. Generally, we have a roof over our head, we have food, we have physiological safety. We have a sense of health and well-being. So the kind of very base needs of a human being are met. And so what we tend to do is start stressing about things that aren't as important and aren't as life-threatening as what our brain has been hardwired to look out for. So something like, oh, I had a pizza instead of going to the gym, can be an incredibly negative experience if we are programming ourselves to see it in that way. Or it could be, I don't feel as cool because that person has this iPhone and I have that iPhone, or I didn't get this many likes on my social media, or I didn't get that project in at work. These things that are not life and death can begin to feel like life and death because we are programmed to have a slightly more neurotic bias towards those ideas and towards those experiences. And so what a gratitude practice does, or a sense and experience of gratitude, it begins to reorient what the mind focuses on. And to keep it really simple, it basically focuses on what we do have opposed to what we don't. And for those of you that have ever had a meditation practice or even a yoga practice, something where you're forced to be a little bit more still and you can actually notice the workings of the mind a little bit more clearly and with a bit more clarity, one of the things you probably observe is how much it's focusing on things that you don't have or things that you didn't do. And so much of what we focus on is what's happened in the past that we can't affect, and then what's happening in the future that we can't yet create. And what a gratitude practice does or through an experience of gratitude, it immediately brings you into the present. And so that can be something as simple as I have my health and well-being, and how fortunate am I? And one of the main things that I brought into my life when it's come to exercise and to whether it's going for a run or working out or whatever it is, it used to feel like a bit of a challenge sometimes. So it's like, oh, I can't be bothered. Oh, I should do this because, otherwise my training's going to slip, or like I'm not going to feel as good, or I'm going to feel less healthy, or whatever it is. And actually the way I reoriented it, it has become, I have a body and how grateful I am that I'm able to use it. And so every time I exercise now, I actually treat it as a gratitude practice, that I have an able body that is capable of doing the things that I want it to do. And I celebrate that by exercising. My meditation practice is the same sort of thing. I have an able mind where I'm able to sit in quiet silence for, between 10, 15, 20, 25 minutes. And I can enjoy that. And so not even I can enjoy it, sorry, I'm able to do that. And therefore I'm going to celebrate the fact that I'm able to do it. When I choose to eat more healthy instead of something that might taste good at a certain time, or consistently healthy, sorry, it's because, again, I'm honoring the fact that I have a body that I want to keep in good shape and I want to feel good in. Similarly, when I have a pizza, I'm also celebrating the fact that I'm able to enjoy the pizza. And so one of the main things that I've learned through my studies through the East, and particularly through yoga and the philosophy of Tantra, is that everything in life is there to be celebrated. Everything in your life is actually there to be enjoyed. And one of the purposes of yoga is to remove all the barriers to your life and to your experience that stop you from enjoying it in the way that you need to, or in the way that you can. And so, instead of, as I said before, instead of I have to work out or I'll feel unhealthy, it's I have a body and I'm celebrating that fact by using it, by going to the gym. I, you know, I'm going to meditate because I owe it to myself to have a few minutes of quiet time, opposed to I need to meditate because the internet says it's good for me. And this subtle reframing over our life actually begins to change the way that our neurology works and the focus of our brain works. And everything becomes a little bit more free and a little bit more easeful. And so a couple of ideas, that's obviously one idea of how you can reframe it, specifically around a couple of well-being exercises. Another one is using affirmations, but as I said before, they're only beneficial if you mean them and if you feel them. And so there's lots of things on Instagram of like, daily affirmations of like, I feel like I love my life because I feel happy and healthy, or like I have someone that loves me, or whatever it is. And all those ideas and those affirmations are good and powerful, but only if you take the time to sit with them and actually experience them. And I'm not saying you have to do that for half an hour. You can sit there and you can write one thing down of, I'm grateful for the fact that I'm alive. And if you close your eyes and take 3 breaths and notice your heartbeat and actually have the felt experience and the felt gratitude for feeling alive, that is having a neurological and biochemical effect on you. Similarly, for, if there's a challenging moment at your job and you're feeling really stressed by it, taking a moment to sit down and feeling grateful for the fact that you have a job that is providing you income and providing you a sense of meaning in your life, that same thing will have a neurological effect and will have a chemical effect. And so affirmations are a good one, but again, caveat, only if you mean and if you feel them. And yeah, as I said before, recognizing why you are doing something, and if there is a need to, or if there's an ability to, changing it to a more positive reason. So not doing something out of guilt or shame or doubt or fear, but actually doing it for the love of doing that. So, another example could be, like my friend reads all the time, and so I'm going to start reading, otherwise I feel like I'm falling behind them. Actually doing it because you want to take some quiet time and choosing to have that moment with the book, and you want to learn, or you want to enjoy a story, or whatever it is. Recognizing that really every opportunity and every activity and everything we do in our life is an opportunity for gratitude. I think another one is for having spoken to some parents, is another one with kids, when the kids are absolutely driving you insane, and taking a moment to remember how grateful you are to have a healthy and happy family, opposed to feeling completely overwrought and I guess exhausted by whatever the kids might be putting you through on that day. But these simple they're simple in theory, but actually relatively complicated. These mental switches and ideas make a huge difference to how we actually see life from a neurological perspective, and the effect that our neurology is having on our body from a hormonal perspective. And yeah, that's the way that I personally see it, I guess, these days, is that I treat my life as a gratitude practice as much as anything else. Where I used to have to be grateful for certain things, I actually now feel like through a few periods of concerted effort, I now feel grateful for everything without necessarily having to think about it. And it means that even when challenging situations come my way, they don't feel like they get me down in any way to the same depths as maybe they did 4, 5, 6 years ago. It doesn't feel as heavy, because I guess in a way I'm not focusing on the things that are challenging. I'm focusing on the things that I do have. And not in a way that's bypassing and ignoring the things that are hard, because some things are hard, but it doesn't feel like it outweighs all the good things in my life, because I made the effort and the changes necessary that allow me to focus on the more positive aspects more often. Because, as I said before, my real belief is that anyone that is listening to this and thinking about these sort of things is in the top 1, 2, 3% of humanity that has ever existed. And we have so much to be grateful for, and it can be so easy through life to forget all the things that we do have when we're thinking and focusing on the things that we don't. And so a simple little change of focus, that over time, this idea of that, like, every single day is 1%, and 1%, if we're incorporating this sort of idea into our day-to-day lives over the course of 3, 6, 9, 12, 18, 24 months, the neurological effects are really quite profound and really make a big difference to a mental switch. And so, yeah, a little bit there, I guess, about why that gratitude is important, what it's doing neurologically and biochemically, and then, yeah, like how you incorporate that into your life, thinking about things where there is a tendency to focus on what you don't have or the shortcomings, and actually taking a moment in those times, a present moment, to reframe something that was negative maybe into something that was a little bit more positive, and to see how that changes how you feel immediately, but also how that compounds over time as well. Yeah, I feel like that's the bulk of that information. Do any of the people that are alive have any questions for that, or any thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, Ziggy, thanks for mentioning pizza several times. I now know what I'm having for dinner.
Nice. You can tell I've been in Asia for so long that I'm obviously thinking about it a bit.
I think I've never heard anyone talk about gratitude in terms of not just mindset, but actually feeling it as well. I quite like that. And I've started probably 3 or 4 months ago, when I go to do something kind of hard at the gym, actually saying 3 things to myself. I say, before I do it, I say, I'm fit, I'm strong, and I'm grateful for what this body can actually do. And I find that's actually been helping in terms of progress, surprisingly. And I like this idea too. You talk about kind of to reorientate ourselves, rather than looking for danger, looking for things to be grateful for. That's great. Thanks for that.
No, thank you. And yeah, it's such a perfect example of what I'm talking about. Have you noticed? You said you have noticed, but I guess, like, could you talk a little bit more about what you've noticed doing those sort of that 3 very real affirmations that you've been doing? Like, what have you noticed a bit of a difference in approach, or maybe days when you feel less motivated? Have you noticed a difference and the effect that it has?
The effect that it has is, I guess, even if it's just almost a placebo effect, it doesn't feel as hard. I might do so many pull-ups and find them really, really difficult, but do the same number of pull-ups, but start it with, I'm fit, I'm strong, I'm grateful for what this body can do. Then actually feels easier to do somehow, maybe. No.
Yeah. And like the thing, the thing to remember with a placebo is also that because our body thinks it works, it does work. And it's the same sort of thing with a gratitude practice or with affirmations or whatever it might be, that that saying those things has a very real physiological and chemical effect, as long as we believe that it is, and that we are taking the time to do it. And so it's a perfect example, I guess, of everything I just spoke about, and the fact that it doesn't matter how it feels easier if it does, really, to me. Yeah, Vince, do you have anything you want to add or anything to say?
I was going to say, you mentioned about kids. I mean, my kids are at an age of 8, 10, and 12. So sometimes, yeah, it does get a bit much. And I guess I kind of have started to really think about it. Like, I don't want them to think that I'm the angry dad all the time. And also, I guess I now in the moment think about it like, what am I actually gaining here? Like, they're kids. They're not adults. They're not gonna. But yeah, I try to, I guess, like you say, in the moment, just take a moment, and I guess it's a negative moment, and try to make it a positive moment. So rather than just telling them no and don't do this and why aren't you doing that, try to flip it and be a bit more positive. Like, suggest what they could do, or take the time to actually sit with them and see why they're doing what they're doing, that sort of thing. And I find it helps me more than anything, because your blood boils when someone gets under your skin, and I guess working with them, I've found that to be a really cool thing, is that I then can adapt that into work life and other aspects of life, where even driving on the road, someone cuts you off, like, who cares, kind of thing. It's not really worth it for myself, and also for the rest of the environment that I'm in. So I've found that to be really good with the gratitude stuff, of that you've mentioned and you get through yoga practice as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, everything you just explained is a really great example of what's actually happening. When we're very emotional and when we're feeling quite stimulated, I guess, by a situation, especially in a negative sense, we're naturally going to be more reactive. But what a gratitude practice is also doing is essentially the more we're activating our prefrontal cortex, the more responsive opposed to reactive we're going to be. So the less we're going to be in our emotions and the more clearly we'll be able to see our emotions and actually choose how we respond, opposed to be really reactive in our response into a situation. And generally when we're reactive, we don't get to choose what we're doing. Kids piss you off, you yell at them. Like there isn't much of a choice in that because it's something, there's like a stimulus and a reaction, opposed to something happening, taking a moment, creating a little bit more space, and then choosing how you respond opposed to react. And gratitude practice does all of that sort of stuff. It does increase our it increases the activity in the part of our brain that is naturally more responsive opposed to emotional. So awesome. All right, well, great to see you, Vince and Jeffrey from before, and for everyone that listened online, thank you very much. Always here for any questions you may have, and hope you have a wonderful week.